Alcera sat in the dark, her long ears flicking occasionally in response to the dull hum of the prison's force field. She had learned not to make any noise, not to draw attention to herself. In a place like this, attention was a commodity that led to swift, unpleasant conclusions. So she sat still, the low frequency of the prison's shielding vibrating through her bones as she waited for the inevitable end. There was no escape, not for her. She had been betrayed by those she trusted most. She had seen the glimmers of it, whispers, encoded messages, strange meetings, then the arrest, the quiet hand of her own people turning against her. The sentence was harsh, but it had been a formality, an easy way to silence someone who knew too much. The prison moon, Cathar, was located in a backwater corner of the galaxy, a forsaken place where the stars were dim, and the only light came from the redshift of nearby neutron stars. Even the Cathari guards seemed to avoid the dark corridors of the facility. That was fine with Alcera. She didn't need them. They had no power over her anymore. She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the cold, metallic wall of her cell, letting the humming vibrations of the force field echo in her mind. She had long given up on thoughts of escape. The Cathari prison was a fortress built into the side of a dying planet, a relic from a time when the galaxy still believed in order. No one had come for her. No one would. Just as she had resigned herself to that grim reality, she heard it. A sound. Not the usual clank of guard boots or the soft hiss of the air system recycling. No, this was something different. A footstep, hesitant, almost too quiet to be real, followed by a muffled curse. "Son of a—" The voice broke through the silence like a dagger, unmistakably human. Alcera blinked, her mind scrambling to process the impossible. A human? Here? Of all places? She sat up straighter, her ears twitching in the direction of the sound. Another step, then a soft bang, followed by more cursing. She stood, her movements fluid, despite the cold, metallic stiffness that had crept into her limbs over the years of confinement. Quietly, she approached the force field. It shimmered with a soft, almost calming glow, but there was no way through it, no way out. She pressed a hand to the cool energy, frowning. She should be concerned. She should be planning her next move, finding a way to use this human intrusion to her advantage. But all she could think about was how absurd the situation was. Another curse, and then the unmistakable sound of someone fumbling with a door panel. The force field wavered for a moment, then blinked out of existence. Alcera blinked. The human had deactivated the security field. She felt a flicker of something. Hope? Curiosity? Certainly not fear. Fear was something she had long abandoned. The human stumbled into the room, his expression one of complete confusion, his face barely visible under a helmet that looked as though it had seen better days, probably several years ago. His clothes were rumpled, his stance unsteady, and there was a certain air of this wasn't part of the plan around him that Alcera could appreciate. He glanced up, noticing her for the first time, and froze. His hand, still holding the helmet to his side, twitched. "Oh," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're not a Cathari." "No," Alcera said dryly. "I'm not, but you seem to be." He blinked at her for a moment, clearly confused by her response, and then his lips quirked into something that might have been a smile if it wasn't so awkward. "I'm Commander Rex Arden," he said, extending a hand. "Human. You're—" "Alcera," she replied, eyeing him warily. "I was a strategist for the Illyrian Accord. Now I'm a prisoner." "Ah." He glanced around the cell, clearly trying to figure out what to make of the situation. "Well, this is a very cozy little cell. Definitely not what I was expecting when I signed up for this rescue mission." Alcera raised an eyebrow. "Rescue mission?" He blinked. Yeah. I was hired to break into this prison and, rescue someone." She stared at him for a moment, then gave a soft laugh. "You've got to be kidding me." "Nope. Serious as a malfunctioning hyperdrive. Look, I wasn't told much, but there was something about you being, well, important. The details were fuzzy." Alcera took a step back, pressing her hand against the force field panel as if it might somehow turn back on. It remained silent, the faint hum gone. The door was wide open, but it was still difficult for her to grasp the reality of the situation. A human, a completely unqualified human according to her calculations, had somehow, against all odds, broken into her cell and was now offering her freedom. Well, I can't exactly turn down the offer, can I? Alcera said, smirking. Seeing as you've already put in the effort. Commander Arden blinked, clearly unsure how to respond, before giving a shrug that somehow seemed both casual and utterly confused at the same time. I mean, hey, I'm here. The exit's that way, I think. He gestured vaguely behind him. Alcera chuckled and shook her head, stepping around him toward the doorway. You're a strange one, Commander Arden. Hey, I've been called worse. He gave her a grin that was, if not entirely charming, at least genuine. Come on, let's get out of here before the Cathari decide they're really unhappy with us. You're going to lead the way, I assume? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Rex paused, then turned around with a sheepish expression. Yeah, about that. So, I might have deactivated the force field, but I didn't exactly read the fine print on the security system. The Cathari could be here any minute. Alcera couldn't help herself. She laughed. It wasn't a soft chuckle either, but a real, genuine laugh. She didn't care how strange it was to feel such a thing after so long, not in the face of this absurd human, this fool who was somehow her only hope. Well then, Commander, she said, stepping into the hallway. Let's not keep them waiting. Alcera followed Rex through the dimly lit corridor, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the dull metallic floor. The prison was an ancient structure, its walls pitted and scarred by the wear and tear of time. The air was thick with the smell of recycled oxygen and something that might have once been food, but had long since ceased to resemble anything edible. The oppressive silence of the place had always been one of its most unnerving features. Now it seemed to press in on her from every side, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Rex, for his part, was muttering to himself as he led the way. Alcera could hear him cursing under his breath, a steady stream of complaints punctuated by the occasional sound of him bumping into a wall or tripping over something invisible. She couldn't decide whether it was endearing or just plain irritating. Right, okay, that panel's not working, Rex said, his voice tinged with exasperation as he slapped at a control panel near a door. I swear I've seen better wiring in the back of a junk shop on Vex 6. How do people even live like this? Don't ask, Alcera muttered. You'll regret it. And just so you know, I'm not rescuing you if you get electrocuted by one of these circuits. Not my problem. Noted, Rex replied, grinning. He stepped back, surveying the panel as if it might spontaneously offer a solution. All right, new plan. I'm going to try. At that moment, the lights flickered above them, and the sound of distant footsteps reached their ears. Alcera's ears perked up instinctively, the familiar threat response settling into her body. Are those Cathari? Rex asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. No, Alcera replied, eyes scanning the corridor. Those are too rhythmic. Someone's coming for us, and they're not Cathari. Rex raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Great. What's the plan then? I'm going to go find out who's coming for us, and you're going to stay behind me and try not to get shot. I like that plan, Rex said, his voice tinged with humor, though there was a slight edge of nervousness to it. But in case I don't survive this, I want you to know. You'll be fine, Alcera said, already moving down the hall toward the source of the noise. I've been in worse situations than this, and I didn't even have the luxury of a human along for the ride. Good to know, Rex muttered, catching up with her as they moved silently toward the intersection up ahead. They reached the corner just as the footsteps grew louder. Alcera pressed herself against the wall, her breath shallow, and Rex did the same, though not as gracefully. He bumped into her once, then twice before finally managing to stand still. She suppressed a grin, not willing to risk making noise. Around the corner came two figures, tall, armored, and unmistakably not Cathari. Their sleek black uniforms were adorned with strange sigils Alcera didn't recognize. Their weapons held loosely at their sides. One of them had a helmet with a visor that reflected the dim lights, while the other was bare-faced, revealing a sharp, angular face with silver tattoos running across his temples. They spoke in low, clipped tones, their voices too soft for Alcera to make out. I don't think they're here for us, Rex whispered, shifting nervously. I don't think so either, Alcera replied, but I'm not going to take any chances. She moved quickly, her body a blur of fluid motion, and before Rex could process what was happening, Alcera was around the corner, her hand already gripping the nearest guard's throat. The man didn't even have time to react before she slammed him into the wall, her other hand reaching for his weapon. The second guard moved to draw his weapon, but Rex was faster. He'd somehow managed to grab a discarded piece of debris, a piece of twisted metal, and with a precise swing, he knocked the guard's gun out of his hand. The man's eyes went wide, and for a moment it seemed like they were both frozen in place. Then Rex grinned sheepishly. Oops, he said, and the guard, now thoroughly confused, took a step back. Don't just stand there, Alcera hissed, twisting the first guard's arm behind his back. Tie them up or something. We don't have time for this. Rex blinked, still processing the situation. Right. Rope? Do we have rope? I don't exactly carry a utility belt, you know. Alcera's eyes narrowed. We don't have rope, just to improvise. With a sigh, Rex grabbed the guard's discarded rifle and, with surprising efficiency, twisted the guard's arms behind his back and fastened them together with the rifle strap. The other guard was similarly restrained in short order, though it wasn't without a few more awkward grumbles from Rex. All right, now that that's taken care of, Rex said, brushing his hand off as if he had just solved a particularly difficult puzzle. Shall we go before more of them show up? Alcera eyed him, half exasperated and half amused. You're an odd human. And you're an oddly competent alien for someone who's been locked in a prison cell for the past few years, Rex replied, smiling in a way that somehow made Alcera roll her eyes. You'll learn to regret that compliment, she muttered. Now let's move before the rest of them come looking for their friends. They continued down the corridor, their pace quickening as they passed through the maze of hallways, each one feeling more like a dead end than the last. Rex kept muttering under his breath, something about faulty tech and disastrous missions, but Alcera ignored him, her mind already elsewhere. They were getting closer. She could feel it, a sense of something shifting in the air. The prison was old, but it wasn't entirely dead. There were still systems running, still watchers waiting in the dark. They weren't alone. Hold up, Alcera said, halting in her tracks. Something's wrong. Rex, who had been about to continue, stopped mid-step. What do you mean? I mean, we're being followed, she said, her eyes scanning the shadows. Not by guards, though. Someone else. Well, that's just great, Rex said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Can't we catch a break? Alcera didn't answer. She just moved ahead, slower this time, listening carefully. Rex followed, but with more caution now, as if he had finally realized just how far over his head he was. There was a sound behind them, quiet but distinct. Footsteps, just like before. They were no longer alone, and this time it wasn't just bad luck. This was a setup. Alcera's pulse quickened as the footsteps grew louder. Rex, his face pale and twitchy, was still muttering about backup plans that would never happen in a million years. But Alcera didn't have time for his anxieties. There was something more pressing, more immediate than whatever quip or clever remark he was about to make. Someone was coming, and they weren't in any hurry to be polite. Can you hear that? She asked quietly, her eyes narrowing as she motioned for Rex to stay close. I hear it, Rex replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Doesn't mean I'm happy about it. Well, we can't exactly outrun them, Alcera muttered, glancing around for any sign of an escape. The corridor stretched out ahead of them, its metal walls flickering with the soft glow of aging lights. It all felt so temporary, like the prison was waiting for its inevitable collapse. Rex was still fumbling with his makeshift weapon, a broken piece of debris, and Alcera resisted the urge to roll her eyes. You're not planning to throw that at them, are you? She asked. Rex looked at the jagged piece of metal in his hands. Hey, it worked on the last guy, he said, offering a sheepish grin. It's not going to work on whoever's coming for us now, Alcera replied. We need to think this through, fast. Rex opened his mouth to respond, but the answer was already clear to Alcera. There was no time to think. There was only time to act. Without another word, Alcera grabbed Rex by the arm and pulled him toward an access hatch she had spotted earlier, a maintenance tunnel leading deeper into the bowels of the facility. It wasn't the best escape route, but it was the only one they had. The tunnel was narrow, its walls lined with pipes and wires that hummed faintly with the lifeblood of the prison. The air was thick with the smell of old machinery and stale air. "Where exactly are we going?" Rex asked, his voice laced with both curiosity and fear. "Because no offense, but I'm not sure that crawling through a maintenance shaft is the ideal way to escape. You want to die in a cell, or do you want to keep running?" Alcera snapped, her voice low but edged with a growl. "Keep up." Rex stumbled behind her, his breathing shallow, but Alcera didn't slow down. The silence between them was filled only with the sound of their footsteps and the occasional hiss of steam from an old pipe. They moved deeper into the bowels of the facility, and Alcera felt her instincts kicking in. This was her element now, her world of strategy and stealth. The human had been useful in his own chaotic way, but it was up to her to finish this. After what seemed like an eternity of twisting and turning through narrow passageways, they emerged into a larger, more open section of the facility. Alcera paused, her senses on alert. The lights here were brighter, and the sound of machinery was louder, more insistent. "I thought you said there was no one else around," Rex whispered, his voice tense as he eyed their surroundings. "I didn't know," Alcera replied. "I was too busy keeping an eye on the Cathari. But that doesn't matter now. We need to take this to the control room." "The control room? You're kidding, right?" Rex looked at her in disbelief. "That's like going straight into the lion's den." "I'm done running," Alcera said flatly. "If they're going to catch me, they'll have to do it on my terms." Rex didn't respond, but the unease in his expression was obvious. Still, he followed her, his footsteps hesitant but determined. They reached the door to the control room in what felt like seconds. Alcera checked the corridor again, her ears listening for any hint of movement. She could feel it now, the unmistakable presence of someone or something just around the corner. The door to the control room slid open with a soft hiss, and Alcera stepped inside. The room was a mess of old tech, blinking consoles and a half-functional holomap of the facility. The air smelled like burnt circuits and something faintly metallic. Alcera moved toward the central console, her fingers flying over the keys, bypassing security protocols she knew too well. She could hear Rex hovering behind her, his breathing still a little too loud for her liking. "Okay, this is the part where you explain how this is all going to work," Rex said, his voice tinged with impatience. "Because, just to clarify, I don't think press a few buttons and hope for the best is a winning strategy." "Shut up," Alcera muttered, focused. "I'm setting the distress signal. You'll be fine." "You mean you're going to blow up the entire facility?" Alcera didn't look up. "I'm not blowing it up, but the Cathari will think so. It'll send them scrambling, long enough for us to get out." "And what happens when it doesn't work?" Rex asked, a hint of panic creeping into his voice. "Then we die, but at least we'll die on our own terms." Alcera's fingers moved faster, faster than she had ever thought possible, her mind calculating every move, every contingency, every escape route. Suddenly there was a sharp clang, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots echoing through the hallway. The Cathari had found them. "Do it now!" Rex shouted, his voice rising in panic. Alcera didn't hesitate. With a final press of a button, she activated the distress signal. The console buzzed once, then went dead. The room fell silent, save for the pounding of her own heartbeat. The doors to the control room slammed open, and a squad of Cathari soldiers stormed inside, their weapons raised. Alcera stood her ground, her eyes locked on the leader of the group. His mask reflected the dim light, hiding his expression, but she could feel the anger radiating off him. "You've sealed your fate," the Cathari leader said, his voice cold. "You will never leave this place alive." Alcera didn't flinch. "I'm not leaving. You are." Rex, standing beside her, glanced nervously between the soldiers and the control panel. I'm pretty sure we're outnumbered here. Like, massively." "Shut up," Alcera muttered. Then to the Cathari leader, "The signal is out. Help is coming. And when they arrive, you'll be the ones running." For a moment, there was only silence. The Cathari leader studied her, his gaze unreadable. Then, without warning, he gestured to his soldiers, and they lowered their weapons. You think this is over? The leader asked, his voice laced with contempt. No, Alcera said, her voice steady. But it's a damn good start. As the Cathari soldiers retreated, Alcera turned to Rex, her expression unreadable. You've done your part, she said, almost softly. Now let's finish this. Rex stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, what's next? Alcera allowed herself a small, rare smile. Next, we get out of here, and we make sure they never catch us again. And for the first time in a long time, Alcera felt the weight of her captivity lift. The human had changed things. No, they had changed each other. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting back. And this time, she was winning.